I'm going to be explaining to you, pointing out but not giving away too much, about the 3 categories of techniques that you are going to focus on to write your essay, analysis essay, on this passage. So let's get started. Categories are syntax, diction, and contrast resulting in irony. You can't just write about irony, you have to write about how irony is constructed too, because other techniques help make up irony. But this is a very enjoyable passage to read. Don't forget, you have to write about the author, Tristram Coffin. It's on the 2nd page at the bottom, and this was written in 1942. Not that you have to state that. So, we start out with the first sentence. The first sentence is very intriguing because it provides a certain contrast, right? Which results in irony. I'm not going to give away everything, that is giving away a lot. But it does attract our attention because it's a little illogical. So that's syntax. You have to take notes under the 3 different categories. I will try to keep to 1 category at a time. But so let's try to do that. Let's try to stay with contrast right now. So, contrast does exist in the 4th paragraph. So let's look at that. Something is being contrasted here. The author and Uncle Amos. And that creates irony. And a tone, you don't just say an ironic tone all the time, it's a tone of incredulity, incredulity, a tone of incredulity. Something doesn't make sense to the author. It happens in here, right? We have a word that gives it away, surprising. It's really a synonym or an indicator that there is irony here. But you have to write about it. I'm not going to tell you every detail. In the next paragraph of this passage, we also have another contrast. What's the indicator that there is a contrast? Sometimes a word will give it away. So you know your contrast is what comes before, what comes after this word. Right? So I'm going to move on. On the 2nd page, let's see where our contrasts are. On the 2nd page, the end of this, about the midpoint of the page. So let's look there. Right around here. Here we have a word again that indicates some sort of contradiction or contrast. Lot passed him by, but not his nephews. So there is a contrast there. Now, it could be irony. There is some irony with it, but it's a little bit of a shift in meaning from the earlier incredulity. There's not incredulity here, like a disbelief. It's a shift into a softer tone, but I'm not going to even say what that tone is. You should be able to figure it out. And then in the last paragraph, there is irony, but it's just sort of a little additional touch to make it a little more charming at the end, to give us a little more feeling of endearment for Uncle Amos. So there's something unnatural that happens after he dies and is buried. But that isn't the key irony. But there is irony there. we have a word that indicates it, don't we? Right there. So, let's shift to syntax. Well, or diction or syntax, I don't know, we'll see. We could shift to diction right now. Do not forget this word. The passage is well constructed. This is not a correct form of such a word. There are words of comparison that normally end in ER, and words that indicate that something is superior. Those are called superlatives, and they end in EST, but this is something that the author made up himself. Why did he do it? It's uncommon. It's atypical. It's breaking the rules. We have that in the syntax too. So there is some irony even with that word. I'm not telling you how irony is inherent in that word, but you should be able to figure it out. Now, keep this word in mind, and then the last long paragraph of the depiction in Uncle Amos's backyard. There is a very key word right here. That's also a very calculated error on the part of the author, but what does it indicate about the author's feelings here? But it goes back to that, it's reminiscent of that earlier word. So diction is very well placed and calculated, and what does it indicate about the author, about the subject matter, Uncle Amos, that the author is creating his own words, breaking some rules, and so on. Of course, this paragraph, the next to the last, well, second from the last, there's two others after, there is very important diction in this paragraph, creating a type of imagery, but you tell me what type of imagery. Right, it's, as I say in some of my instructions, it's very aesthetic, A-E-S-T-H-E-T-I-C, aesthetic, having to do with beauty. Why? Okay, I don't need to point out all the details here. You find the words that go with that focus. And if we go back to the earlier sections, yes, there are words that are key also. Some of the diction is very calculated to ease the transition between paragraphs. And that word, ease, is mentioned a lot in the second half of the first page, but that is a little obvious. I'd rather you not write about something so obvious. Try to pick the more clever techniques. Now, let's shift to syntax. This is a scheme. At the very top, I have to get there. There we go. This first sentence is a scheme. I'm not telling you what type. It does start with an A, as many do, but it's not an aphora. But I already talked about it in the contrast section earlier. So, keep that in mind. So that's one schematic or syntactical technique. And there is a lot of parallelism. There is, but there are some more clever techniques than that. I'm going to point out several that go together. They're all the same strategy. Remember I told you this was breaking the rules? Now that was in diction, but in syntax we have the same thing here. And in the second paragraph, and we have in the next paragraph the same situation. And that is, oh, 2 paragraphs down. Right there, I'll move that up. That's another example of what I was just pointing out in the second paragraph. How are the rules being broken there? What does that indicate? What's the message the author is conveying by breaking the rules here? And oh yes, right here, same thing. This is the same situation syntactically that is. Right? I'm not telling you exactly what is being done there, but hopefully you can figure it out. And we do get, I am going to jump into the other category that I just was explaining. In this paragraph right here, that word, hove, it's not typical. He didn't make it up. It's a dialectical word, it's colloquial, but why? Why choose such a colloquial word as hove? And then in the last full paragraph, longer paragraph on the front side, we do have, right here, the word afire and got drowned, similar to hove. And even on the next page, we do have a similar situation too. All right. But yes, it's at the beginning of the long paragraph on the next side where he mentions galosses. Must mean overalls or something. But what do those all have in common? Why such colloquial words to describe the uncle? But let's keep working on syntax. Even on as we finish the first side, yes, there is a lot of parallelism, even anaphora. He never is in there a few times. And even more. There's a lot of never. But that's also setting up the contrast. Never making much money, but. So that goes with that other category that I talked about earlier. So, the anaphora works with the contrast. Some things never happened, but something positive even resulted despite the things never happening. It's irony, it's contrast, and it's highlighted with the anaphora, right? Or the parallelism of never, too. And then, yes, we do have looking for more syntax for you. Yes, on the second page. Yes, there is syntax here that's strategized by the author. Right here. He's breaking the rules again with this. Okay? Just like he did on the earlier page, first page. Okay. There is some cleverness I like at the end of this. I know I'm getting near to the end of my time here on this video, but the imagery here, coming back to the imagery, listening to bees, not listening to Uncle Amos, who was bumbling. Why such a similarity between the nature surrounding and the description of Uncle Amos's actions? It takes a little bit of thinking to understand this intention of the author there. Bumbling, what type of word is that? It's a sound device, but it starts with an O. I'm not going to tell you. Okay, so we do have that. Also, I noticed in this next to the last long paragraph on the back side, we have "and" in here an awful lot. It does create